Which, the one thing that's kind of cool is if you look at terrestrial hermit crab blood, as these guys did back in 1981, it was a very random paper. This is great natural history type stuff where they're like, we just decided to sample a whole bunch of terrestrial crustaceans' blood. And we did that for these, and we did that for hermit crabs, and we found that hermit crabs had elevated uric acid in their blood. And we think that's potentially a really good candidate to remodel these shells, because if you try to just scrape these things away, and if you even get a drill and just try to power drill through some of these brand new shells, it can take you literally sometimes 10 minutes to get through that shell. Like, this is not easy stuff with a power drill, okay? These crabs, it seems, takes quite a while. It still takes like months to a year, but we think there's no way that it'd be possible to do that exclusively with physical remodeling. This probably has to be something they secrete. And the real mystery here, even if it is uric acid, which we're not sure yet, is how do you not dissolve your own exoskeleton when you're dissolving out the calcium carbonate in the shell? It's actually a very cool mystery, whether they secrete another layer of something like wax or not. What we do know is that when we start to bathe these shells in different types of acid, we can replicate the same types of end result architectural remodeling that the crabs do. The other thing we're doing, and this was kind of like a early pilot project, which now I'm very excited because Leah's mom will just finish it for me. Because Leah's mom is like an expert on all sorts of, she's an expert. She works for the DOD, and she does all sorts of stuff on like structural, kind of mechanical stuff. But my hope is that I can give Leah's mom a whole bunch of shells, and she works on scanning electron microscopes, and we can start to look at the fine-grained detail of any signature that's left after these crabs have done this remodeling. And so if they are using a certain chemical, those little details, when you get down to that level, should actually be different than shells that are just physically remodeled. So these are still kind of interesting mysteries. We're still trying to figure them out. All right, it's been a while. I think I'm going to end here, but I'm going to summarize this, okay? And the summary is this. So these terrestrial hermit crabs, they move on to land, right? And what's very cool on land is that they have relaxed predation pressures. That doesn't mean there's no predation at all, but it's relaxed. And that allowed them to basically get away with remodeling. What specifically favored that, we think, is that it lowered these locomotion costs for them to get around, especially to have to carry a shell on land with no water buoyancy. And that once that happened, the really interesting thing is that these remodeled shells start accumulating in the population. And that becomes their main resource that's handed down, and that seems to have set off a cascade of a lot of other things, okay? It seemingly has ratcheted up their level of sociality relative to marine guys. It's basically caused these resource cascades. It caused coalition, signals, brain, and I did not mention this, it's not a typo, it seems really weird, but I have measured now quite a lot of hermit crab penises, and this was initially a very accidental thing that I stumbled upon, but this species, Cyanobita compressus, seems to have one of the largest penises of any hermit crab. And not coincidentally, it does the most remodeling. And so this is kind of, we're still working out these details, but what we think is going on is it's pretty darn dangerous to engage in some hanky-panky on the beach and come out of your shell. No joke. It could be life or death. Someone could steal your shell in the midst of that. And what we think is going on is that the more remodeling that you have, the more there's an incentive to not come all the way out of their shell, and that's what that enlarged sexual structure enables. The other thing that we think is really cool, and this is still speculative now, is that doing all this remodeling may have dramatically constrained the opportunities for any sort of adaptive radiation for a whole bunch of species to now kind of evolve from one. Because now that there's less diversity in those shells, there's less opportunity to specialize on one or the other shell. They're all virtually the same in their internal architecture. And again, we're still working out the mechanism, but we're hoping Leah's mom will completely resolve that for us. I'm just kidding. We'll see. We'll see. All right. I'd be happy to take any hermit crab questions. We're going to be around through tomorrow morning. So if you guys have any questions, and she's going to be here for a very long time. So if you have lots of hermit crab questions, you can also ask her, and she can answer those for you. Thanks. Those are a lot of people that have been helpful, including Gary Herman, who's really cool. Yeah.
So when they do the remodeling and open up more space inside the shell, does that happen on a time frame that's good enough so that if they mold, they might be able to retain the same shell by continuing to hollow out?
That's really intriguing. Some of them die in the process of remodeling. They only partially accomplish it, and someone else moves in. But the idea that all that calcium that they remove from the shell could be incorporated in their exoskeleton is something we're kind of hopeful we might be able to test based on looking at isotope signatures and the stuff that's in the shell versus what ends up in their exoskeleton. But right now, we have no idea if that's the case or not. It would seem a pretty cool solution if they did it. Yeah.
The isotopic signature is very different.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Cool. Yeah.
So many marine species don't necessarily have continuous size structure, and it strikes me that these terrestrial hermit crabs are really reliant upon that continuous size structure, so they can have these vacancy chains. So do you always see that continuous structure, or do you ever have cases where like they have gaps and that would be a break in the chain?
There's definitely gaps, and I think there's like some level of stochasticity and uncertainty sort of in like where they are in space and time. So like in a way, if these sounds that they make are recruitment signals, it sort of like is a way to relieve the problems that happen when like just by chance they don't get the right formation of individuals. And I mean, the one thing that's sure is that the smallest individuals, you can have like vast nurseries of baby terrestrial hermit crabs that are all in like a mangrove tree that's like about the size of this room, like literally 10 to 30,000 individuals who are all clustered, kind of waiting to move up. And part of their congregating in that spot is to, because they are at that very low size, potentially, you know, liable to predation. So they congregate in these mangrove trees, right? But once they get above a certain size, I think there is a lot of hanging around with individuals who are of just the right next size for you. Which maybe those individuals like don't want to be hung around because they also don't want to get evicted. So it creates like a lot of interesting conflicts of interest. But it is kind of cool how like the gastropod size structure ultimately determines these guys' kind of population size structure.
My other thought was that so you have all these, you showed some pictures of the predators that have big, high strike forces that can crush their shells. But from the hermit crab's perspective, those are not the predators they want. Because they're going to break the shell.
Those are the worst ones,
Right, so then it seems like you would need the non-breaking predators around for the hermit crabs to really benefit from the situation.
Yeah, and like these predatory gastropods here and some octopus and other things are really good at not destroying the shell. And it, if you want to see a really compelling clip, there's some Nat Geo clip someone took that is of a predatory snail like slowly taking out another one with like all this like over-the-top narration, right? And then as it's degrading out that other snail, like several hermit crabs, presumably through these chemical cues, have come to that spot. And like one of them jumps into the shell while it's still like just barely being released and is still attached to the predator, like manages to get into that, but super dangerous. And luckily, like that shell then after like a few seconds, the predator releases it, doesn't eat the hermit crab, and it like runs away. So there is like instances, even in the marine guys, where there's like that kind of intense cooperation. But yeah, you're absolutely right that it's dependent upon non-destructive kind of snail death. And so some of the ones that we're doing are ones where we're just trying to like smash the shell, no chemical, enzyme stuff, and just put that out and see if there's a differential attraction to the ones that have a predatory enzyme that would indicate, boy, here's a shell that is still intact potentially. Yeah. Yep.
How does the molt process work with all of this? Do they have to exit their shells in order to molt?
They can stay in the shell, which is good. Another cool story that we're still trying to work out is, and a lot of these things are like, this is why natural history is so cool, a lot of these things are like, you're doing one experiment, doesn't quite work, and like by some accident something else happens that's an intriguing hint of like what's going on. And one of these experiments was putting out vast quantities of painted shells that were remodeled, laying them out there, and it's like a big cool swap and everything's going on. You return a few hours later and all these painted shells are in the trees like it's Christmas, okay? All these crabs, having a shell that weighs now much more than their body weight and is a bigger, more preferred shell, but still remodeled, have climbed up into the trees and go out to the ends of branches and are hanging there. And one of the things that we think they're doing is they're escaping the danger, especially right after you move in a shell and your abdomen hasn't fully grown to accommodate it, where you could be very liable to eviction. And they're kind of paying a cost to get up there. And so experiments that I haven't put up there but are very clean results where you hang shells from trees versus put them on the ground, they have dramatically different encounter rates. So we think they get up the tree, and I haven't tracked them long enough to know if they can do this, but it's possible they could like molt up there. But they definitely can remain in the shell through a molt and they don't have to come out. Yeah. Yeah.
Last question.
Sure.
That massive aggregation.
Yeah.
Of hermit crabs to that beach.
That's a migration. So that guy, yeah, that was in the Caribbean. Guy's name was Steve Simonson, and like he has a great description where he's just like driving around. He's like, and then I saw all these hermit crabs and busted out my video equipment. They are coming on a land to sea migration to release their eggs, and that particular species, unlike the one that I mentioned throughout this talk, which hangs out right along the shoreline and goes right back into the rainforest, which is literally adjuts with the sea. So their whole life is kind of spent right near the edge of the ocean. Those guys can go up high into the mountains, and they spend most of the year up there, and they have a singular time around August or September when they all come down, and it's like a beautiful thing that no one has done any studies on, right? You could hook up mini GPSs to these things, start to know their paths and all of the social cues that are enabling to do this, but they all come down to the ocean and then they get to the edge, and that's where they release all of their eggs. So that's what that massive aggregation was. Yep. And if you listen to that video very carefully, you can hear the background croaking and chirping that they're making in the video. It's pretty, you know, even among the epic music, you can hear like, it's pretty cool.
Okay, Mark, you're going to be around for tomorrow, so please get in with any other questions you have. And thank you again.